And as I mentioned, we've got our 9'6" piece here. This confuses tons of people. It is a little wonky, you know, on the initial setup. You've got some drilling in the inside corners, a few places that you'll have to do. Don't worry if you are a little bit confused by that. The L deck is a little more simple of a concept to understand, but once you do this, it's far, far easier after that initial setup. As you're taking your sections out at the end of the year, because they do have specific holes drilled in them in certain places, just take them out in order, walk them straight to shore. Don't spin them when you go to stack them, just set them down. You don't need to number them or anything. You can, but you don't need to, as long as you just walk them out, set them down in the order. So, show you this little gap here. So this will make a little bit more sense. So we have these sections to make this seamless merger here. It is 9'6". It's not a cut down section. It is actually welded with the framework the same underneath. If you cut down just a traditional one, you're going to end up with the framework tubing too close to the end, and you're going to have hole issues with your hole location where you drill. So these are actually custom made for this, so it makes this seamless transition. If you have seen one otherwise, the way some people do it with just regular 4x10s, they have this butted up to it. They would have another 4-foot support holding the end of this one here, and then usually some flat plate brackets that go underneath the dock, share the holes there and the bolts, and that keeps them together. The awful part about that is you get two poles side by side on this outside corner, and the feet will interfere with each other, and then you end up with a pole on the inside corner, and it's just sloppy, but it works. So this allows us to eliminate that 4-footer, have a seamless transition, and it will line up with these factory holes here. So coming down this smooth side as we're going down, this setup can actually go either direction. Doesn't matter to us. We try to keep our notes the same, so if you want to add on in other years or change something, we know what you're talking about when we keep your drawings. So, but either way, if you change your mind, you know, after the initial thing, you move your dock, you can flip flop it. If you already installed it, you'll just have some extra holes drilled, which will be a little ugly, but it can do the same thing, or it can do a T, either way. So got a lot of options. But coming down the smooth side in this example, these bolts from the factory, these slots, are going to line right up. On the other side, it will not. It'll be about 3 inches off. So we use the seamless line out the tread gap there to line up where that other support will actually get drilled over there. So we're going to take a walk around either way on this or on the L deck. Again, we always put a third support in the middle. That does make our quotes higher artificially. If you compare apples to apples, you know, we again want to make it right at a fair price and do it right the first time. So that adds extra support from your feet, from the extra weight, and also the stability of the dock. So this, as we're going in, as we're leveling around here, we're going to keep this down out of the way, because otherwise you'll be teeter-tottering on this potentially. So normally I would adjust this down. These are a 9/16 bolt. It is not a one-handed operation like the Max Lock, but we do a 1.5 by 5 inch vertical extrusion on these 12-foot beams, and they actually have a groove in the top, so these stringer brackets can slide, and also grooves on this side for accessories like bumpers. In some cases, most people don't use those, but every time you bend that metal like that in the extrusion, you're gaining rigidity and strength. So just by having that, it's a lot stronger and more rigid for the bounce and the vertical structure versus just having a regular rectangular hollow piece of metal. So adds a little bit of weight, but tons of rigidity there. So as I mentioned, on the far side, those factory holes are going to line up. We use this tread gap going across to center our pole. As you can see, this does not line up. Like I mentioned, it's about 3 inches off. So once you're happy with that, the platform's all nice and square. There's a little trick to that as you're dropping it in, because these tolerances are fairly tight side to side on these stringer brackets. And again, you may have to move them a little bit. It's a little tricky to drop the 3 sections in and having all 3 supports kind of square and get them all to fit in nice and line up these edges nicely here so you don't have an offset. So Sometimes you got to do some kind of sliding around like this. You know, it just depends. And you know, if you don't have these bolted on, sometimes the waves can be fighting you a little bit. So generally it's not too bad, but just pay attention, especially before you drill, to make sure that these are still touching here. I would have that outside bolted at that point, and you know, check 2 or 3 times before you start drilling. So once we're happy with these lined up, we've got this running nice and straight down the center of that gap. Again, I can't stress enough that, you know, these are only 86 pounds a piece generally on these 4x10 anodized sections, even with the double runners and the 4 support side to side. So at some point that structure is worth something. Somebody else may say, hey, ours is a little lighter. That's because they're giving you less underneath. So a lot of wood sections, wood deck with the aluminum side rails, they're around 200 pounds a piece. If you have full wooden joists under yours, like 2x6 joists, especially 3 of them, you're probably pushing 250 or more. So that's usually where you get those 8-foot sections. But here, you know, I can lift up the entire 4 sections just, you know, on one shoulder. Going in here, once we have that drilled, I would bolt that in here in the middle. These stringer brackets, just the same, will not line up. So we've got our docks there. We could bolt that, but then they're not fastened down. So right where that hole is, I'm just going to drill there, 3/8 bit, just drilling straight through. Same on this one, but it's a little bit different on this joint under here. So you've got several joints happening. Some people go wild on it. Some people drill through there to match the hole that's on the other side where you've got this 3-way joint. I just like going under here. So we've got our factory hole on this bracket. We've got the factory hole on our last runway dock. We're just making a new hole on the next one of the platform. So you're just gonna have that there. And again, because we are sharing that stringer bracket with both edges of the dock, we're gonna be using that 2-inch bolt to go through all 3. So it's pretty simple. That confuses a lot of people at first time setup doing that. Some people, you know, think they need to drill out the second hole, but because the dock is actually coming past here, it is attached there. So it's just the inside corner of the 4x9'6" that would be loose there, but generally it pinches and it will be so solid you do not need to drill that second hole. So that's up to you if you want to. Most people do not. They're just going to be going through here and joining up through that first factory hole into the side of the other.